Today, the world is beset by several crises of a global importance. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has precipitated a humanitarian tragedy with far-reaching social and economic consequences. The refugee crisis stemming from this war amplifies attention to a wider refugee crisis involving tens of millions of people around the globe. The economic and humanitarian repercussions of rising costs of energy and food are likewise intensifying. The war in Ukraine has also shocked a world weary and damaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus has taken more than 6 million lives, and in April 2022, it is still causing thousands of deaths each day. So ladies and gentlemen, Economic and Business Faculty from Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Veteran Jakarta proudly present the second JESICA, Jakarta Economic Sustainability International Conference Agenda. Hold important agenda that discusses global issues related to resilience and sustainability that are happening in the current environment. Let's rise together against the global crisis both due to the economic and the pandemic. Please welcome this agenda.
Ini langkah awal dari sebuah senyuman. Langkah untuk membuka lembaran baru yang berharga. Dengan langkah yang dijalani bersama untuk satu tujuan. Memetik harapan, memantapkan keyakinan, menggiring sebuah impian. Kami berjalan tanpa gentar, tak kenal akan batasan, menjangkau hingga penjuru negeri. Kini dan nanti, BRI, Pegadaian dan PNM terus melangkah, bersatu membawakan perubahan di satu tempat. Perubahan yang mendekatkanmu dengan kami, membukakan jalan menuju kemajuan bagi semua. Kemajuan yang membawa kemudahan dalam satu genggaman. Inilah jawaban yang menghadirkan senyuman dan membuatmu bertumbuh lebih besar, melebarkan kesempatan untuk semua bisa berkarya dan memberi nilai lebih untuk kamu tumbuh dan berkembang dan mendatangkan peluang untukmu yang semakin luas. Inilah satu dari sekian perjalanan kami memberi makna untuk semua bisa senyum. Ini langkah awal dari sebuah senyuman. Langkah untuk membuka lembaran baru yang berharga. Dengan langkah yang dijalani bersama untuk satu tujuan. Memetik harapan, memantapkan keyakinan, menggiring sebuah
Welcome to the Faculty of Economics and Business UPN Veteran Jakarta. FEB UPN VJ is here to respond to the challenges of digital technology as part of the demands of Industry 4.0 for Indonesian society's development. Therefore, FEB UPN VJ strives to become a faculty that is excellent, innovative, internationally qualified, competitive, and rooted in patriotism. FEB UPN VJ offers three majors: economics, management, and accounting, with study programs ranging from associate degree to master's degree. Four of the 8 existing study programs have acquired A accreditation. The undergraduate accounting study program curriculum has been recognized by ACCA since 2018, and it has succeeded in becoming a model center of excellence for the implementation of MBKM in 2021.
Selama lebih dari 29 tahun, Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis UPN Veteran Jakarta terus bertransformasi dan berkomitmen dalam menghasilkan lulusan terbaik yang berpotensi memainkan peran penting baik di sektor pemerintahan maupun sektor swasta dalam menjawab tantangan ekonomi global untuk pembangunan masyarakat Indonesia yang berkelanjutan.
FEB UPN VJ has restructured the curriculum by implementing the Outcome-Based Education or OBE curriculum, which means the learning curriculum is oriented to the learning outcomes of graduates from learning experiences. In addition, FEB requires its students to take professional certification before choosing a career path. In 2021, there were 135 scientific papers researched by FEB UPN VJ lecturers published in reputable national and international journals. Currently, FEB UPN VJ has a Journal of Economics and Business, a Journal of Equity, and a Journal of Islamic Economics and Finance Studies. To accommodate student research, FEB UPN VJ plans to publish 4 scientific journals with an ISSN in each undergraduate study program. Furthermore, FEB UPN VJ regularly hosts national and international conferences.
Kurikulum yang kami buat disesuaikan dengan perkembangan teknologi dan dunia industri. Selain itu, kami terus berupaya meningkatkan kualitas dan kuantitas penelitian dosen, berkolaborasi dengan berbagai perguruan tinggi baik tingkat nasional maupun internasional.
FEB UPN VJ has educators that are competent, professional, and have high integrity in both administrative and academic services. There are 28% of permanent lecturers holding PhD degrees and teaching personnel from practitioners, including government institutions, state-owned businesses, industry, and academics from well-known universities in Indonesia and overseas. In 2022, the Faculty of Economics and Business has a professor in accounting, namely Professor Dr. Erna Hernawati, AK CPMA CA CGOP. Located on Campus 1 Pondok Labu South Jakarta, FEB UPN VJ provides facilities and infrastructure that support the implementation of academic and non-academic activities, starting from academic and student service facilities to BI Corner. To support the lecture process, FEB UPN VJ innovates in developing digital technology that can support combined online and offline lectures with the presence of Mesh Classroom and Smart Classroom facilities. In addition, FEB UPN VJ has several laboratories, including the Sibuni Laboratory, Mini Company, Mini Bank, and Economics Laboratory equipped with digital learning tools such as SAS applications, virtual trading, data processing tools, data analysis, statistics, econometrics, big data macro and micro.
Peningkatan pelayanan baik akademik maupun non-akademik dengan menciptakan pusat administrasi berbasis digital. Selain itu, kami telah mencanangkan zona integritas wilayah bebas korupsi dan wilayah birokrasi bersih dan melayani, serta pelaporan efektivitas dan efisiensi pelaksanaan program kerja.
In an effort to improve services to the people of Indonesia, FEB UPN VJ offers 3 professionally managed business units, including the Investment Gallery, which provides publications and print materials on the capital market published by the Indonesia Stock Exchange, the Tax Center, which offers training and tax consultancy, the Institute for the Study of Taxes, and the Economics and Business Studies Foundation, which serves as a reference for studies and professional certification bodies such as Certified Human Capital and Certified Mitigation in Procurement. FEB UPN VJ has 14 student organizations and study groups. One of the creative ideas of FEB UPN VJ students was holding the BEM FEB Music Festival in 2021, which was broadcast by video.com and successfully demonstrated an attitude of independence in entrepreneurship. In addition, various achievements have been achieved by FEB UPN VJ students, both at national and international levels. In order to work together to face the growth of the global economy, the Faculty of Economics and Business also develops its partnerships and cooperation with universities, with national and international institutions.
Adanya kerjasama dengan berbagai pihak, mahasiswa dapat meningkatkan pengalaman dan wawasannya, baik secara nasional maupun secara global, sehingga dapat tercipta link and match antara kampus dengan industri.
This is where it all started, the path towards the future, with the Faculty of Economics and Business UPN Veteran Jakarta.
Maju bersama,
Bergerak,
meraih prestasi.
In recent years, there have been many disparate uses of the term sustainability and resilient, with some framing sustainability and resilient as the same concept. Sustainability was defined through the triple bottom line of the environmental, social, and economic system consideration. Resilient was viewed as the ability of a system to prepare for threats, absorb, impact, recover, and adapt following persistent stress or a disruptive event. Since the beginning of the millennium, societies, economic, and the earth itself has been subject to disruption of increasing frequency and severity. Each evolved differently from the others, but many disruptions have overlapping consequences that can be long-lived and are not completely understood at the time of impact. Today, the world is beset by several crises of a global importance. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has precipitated a humanitarian tragedy with a far-reaching social and economic consequences. The refugee crisis stemming from this war amplifies attention to a wider refugee crisis involving tens of millions of people around the globe. The economic and humanitarian repercussions of rising costs of energy and food are likewise intensifying. The war in Ukraine has also shocked a world weary and damaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus has taken more than 6 million lives, and in April 2022, it is still causing thousands of deaths each day. So ladies and gentlemen, Economic and Business Faculty from Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Veteran Jakarta proudly present the second JESICA, Jakarta Economic Sustainability International Conference Agenda. Hold important agenda that discusses global issues related to resilience and sustainability that are happening in the current environment. Let's rise together against the global crisis both due to the economic and the pandemic. Please welcome this agenda. In recent years, there have been many disparate uses of the term sustainability and resilience, with some framing sustainability and resilience as the same concept. Sustainability was defined through the triple bottom line of the environmental, social, and economic system consideration. Resilience was viewed as the ability of a system to prepare for threats, absorb, impact, recover, and adapt following persistent stress or a disruptive event. Since the beginning of the millennium,
Ini langkah awal dari sebuah senyuman. Langkah untuk membuka lembaran baru yang berharga. Dengan langkah yang dijalani bersama untuk satu tujuan. Memetik harapan, memantapkan keyakinan, menggiring sebuah impian. Kami berjalan tanpa gentar, tak kenal akan batasan, menjangkau hingga penjuru negeri. Kini dan nanti, BRI, Pegadaian dan PNM terus melangkah, bersatu membawakan perubahan di satu tempat. Perubahan yang mendekatkanmu dengan kami, membukakan jalan menuju kemajuan bagi semua. Kemajuan yang membawa kemudahan dalam satu genggaman. Inilah jawaban yang menghadirkan senyuman dan membuatmu bertumbuh lebih besar, melebarkan kesempatan untuk semua bisa berkarya dan memberi nilai lebih untuk kamu tumbuh dan berkembang dan mendatangkan peluang untukmu yang semakin luas. Inilah satu dari sekian perjalanan kami memberi makna untuk semua bisa senyum.
Indonesia is the most beautiful land in the universe. The land where we were born, the nation where we grew up. So many colors that live together in peace, with a million timeless treasures, with an abundance of natural wealth Indonesia is not just wonderful. Indonesia is a wonderland.
In recent years, there have been many disparate uses of the term sustainability and resilient, with some framing sustainability and resilient as the same concept. Sustainability was defined through the triple bottom line of the environmental, social, and economic system consideration. Resilient was viewed as the ability of a system to prepare for threats, absorb, impact, recover, and adapt following persistent stress or a disruptive event. Since the beginning of the millennium, societies, economic, and the earth itself has been subject to disruption of increasing frequency and severity. Each evolved differently from the others, but many disruptions have overlapping consequences that can be long-lived and are not completely understood at the time of impact. Today, the world is beset by several crises of a global importance. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has precipitated a humanitarian tragedy with a far-reaching social and economic consequences. The refugee crisis stemming from this war amplifies attention to a wider refugee crisis involving tens of millions of people around the globe. The economic and humanitarian repercussions of rising costs of energy and food are likewise intensifying. The war in Ukraine has also shocked a world weary and damaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus has taken more than 6 million lives, and in April 2022, it is still causing thousands of deaths each day. So ladies and gentlemen, Economic and Business Faculty from Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Veteran Jakarta proudly present the second JESICA, Jakarta Economic Sustainability International Conference Agenda. Hold important agenda that discusses global issues related to resilience and sustainability that are happening in the current environment. Let's rise together against the global crisis both due to the economic and the pandemic. Please welcome this agenda.
Check. Well, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our event is about to begin. So please keep quiet. And don't forget to prepare your notes. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our event is about to begin. Please keep quiet. And don't forget. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, and greetings of virtue. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a wonderful and precious chance for me, Cheryl Angelica. I'm a student from Faculty Economic and Business UPN Veteran Jakarta, and now I will be the Master of Ceremony in this beautiful morning on Friday, 2nd of December 2022, in our big event, Jakarta Economic Sustainability International Conference Agenda 2022. First of all, let's say thanks to Almighty God, to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has been giving us guidance, happiness, healthy, and mercy, so we can attend and participate in this event without any obstacles. Secondly, praise and salutation upon our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who has guided us from the darkness to the lightness. And in this beautiful moment, I would like to welcome Professor Oscar Ugartesi from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, and Dr. Khalil Manaf Hejarti from as the Director Policy at Article 3 Trade and Sustainability Specialist, Professor Liazat Sembieva from Eurasian University, Professor Tulus Tambunan from University of Trisakti, who will be the speakers at our event today. And also the Honorable Associate Professor Dr. Dian Wicaksi Arif Tiara, SCAK, MAK, CA, CSRS, as the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, UPN Veteran Jakarta, and the Honorable Dr. Andes Munasiron Miftah, MM, as the Vice Dean for General Affairs and Finance, Faculty of Economic and Business, UPN Veteran Jakarta. The Honorable Mr. Ahmad Nur Hidayat, MPP, as the Chairman of JESICA 2022. The Honorable Diplom Kofrau Friska Syafitri, SEMA, as today's moderator. And also respectable to all participants of this event. And this event can also be held with the participation of our sponsors. There are GAPKI, or Gabungan Pengusaha Kelapa Sawit Indonesia, and PLN Nusantara Power, PJB, or Pembangkit Jawa Bali, Bank BRI, and Bank BTN. And also don't forget to visit Bank BTN booth back there. Feel free to ask anything about Bank BTN. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin this event by singing our national anthem, Indonesia Raya, and our university anthem. So to all of the audience, please stand up. Thank you.
Indonesia ku tercinta, persatuan
Thank you. You may be seated now. Okay, let's move to the next agenda. And now we will have a photo session with our participants and also with our speakers today. So I immediately invite to all the lecturer of Faculty Economic and Business UPN Veteran Jakarta, and also for the speakers, please take a place in front of the audience. Thank you. Okay, once more. Okay, to all audience, please stand up. Thank you. Because we'll have a photo session. Please stand up. Okay, thank you. I will count down the photo session in 3, 2, 1. Again, bela negara pose. Okay, bela negara pose. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, done. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we proceed to the webinar agenda. And to all audience, don't forget to write the resume. Please write your resume, and the resume must be collected to your head of study program. So please take a note to the presentation of our speakers. And this presentation will be delivered by Professor Oscar Ugartisi from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, Dr. Kahlil Manaf Hejarti, Professor Lezat Sembieva, and Professor Tulus Tambunan. And also this agenda will be guided by Diplom Kofrau Friska Syafitri SEMA as the moderator. So I immediately invite our moderator, Mrs. Friska. Please take a place to the stage. Please give applause to our moderator. Okay, so this is our moderator. I want to say hi first. Hello, Miss Friska. How are you? Okay, maybe the committee, please help.
Okay.
Hello,
I'm good. I'm very well this morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Miss Friska, the first allow me to introduce you by reading your CV. Thank you. Okay, so this is a little bit short biography of our moderator. So Mrs. Friska Syafitri is now engaged as a lecturer at the Economic Faculty UPN VJ and expert staff for the Budget Committee at the House of Representatives of Indonesia. And she also the co-founder and board of executive of the Global Academic on Migration and Development with headquarters in the Philippines and whose representatives are located in the UK, the Netherlands, Italy, Mexico, Ecuador, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. And previous to that, she worked as a think tank and researcher at some international institutions such as OECD as advisor for Southeast Asia Regional Program, GIZ, and was awarded as a fellow student at United Nations University. And also Miss Friska earned her master's degree in academic development as well as in business management at the University of Applied Science in Germany. Okay, and she is also pursuing her PhD at the Gajah Mada University, Indonesia. Okay, so that's all a little bit introduction about our moderator. So to Mrs. Diplom Co-Frau Friska Syafitri, SEMA, time is yours.
All right. Thank you for the short introduction. That was really, really wow. Are you ready, everyone? I don't hear the voice. Are you ready? All right. That's much better. All right. Good morning, everyone. The Honorable Speaker, our Dean and Vice Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business, Bapak Munasiroh Miftah, and Head of Economic, Bapak Fahru Novrian, Head of Management, Ibu Desmintari, the Chairman of the second JESICA, Bapak Ahmad Hidayat, and all the panelists, as well as my dear colleague from the Faculty of Economic and Business. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome you to the second Jakarta Economic Sustainability International Conference, so we call it JESICA. And I thank you all for coming here today to attend this event virtually or offline. I hope you are all ready for these sessions, and this afternoon we're gonna have these lively discussions. So please give a big applause and warm welcome to all of us. Thank you so much. Can I get another big applause, please? Thank you very much. So our topic today is the International Economic Sustainability, Relevance on Non-Alignment and Non-Discrimination Agreement, Impact to Small Business and Palm Oil Trade. So I trust this issue an essential topic nowadays, since we all know that the international economic sustainability is the central for a long-term business globally. And many of us related to this either as a policymakers, as a private sector, as a student, as an academia, as a teacher or educator, or any one of you. Now, I think let's take a moment to introduce our speakers. So we have four honorable speakers, and each of speaker will give us the brilliant perspective that help us better understand this issue and how it looks like in the future, how to overcome it, and perhaps they will also explain how is the history. So let's start first with the professor. Let's start with the Professor Oscar Ugace. So let me. Professor Oscar Ugace, he began his study in a letter at the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. Later continued with fianzas at Fordham University in New York, where he received the Who is Who in American College and University Award. So he completed a Master of Arts in International Finance at the London School of Business a London Business School in London, and PhD in philanthropy and history from the University of Bergen. So in December 2015, he received a doctor honoris causa from the National University of San Agustin in Arequipa, Peru, for his contributions to the knowledge of the international economy. So as an economist, he has contributed to research for the National Planning Institute of Banking and the credit system in Peru. Likewise, he has served as a consultant in the World Bank, the UN Conference on the Trade and Development, the UN the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, so also the International Labour Organization and Oxfam. So I think Professor Oscar Ugarte can give us such a brilliant perspective. So Professor Ugarte, hello, how are you? Can you hear my voice?
Yes, hello, good evening and good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm back now in Mexico. It's like opposite, right? The time difference is quite like 12 hours ahead.
Exactly 12 hours. It's 8 o'clock here.
All right.
Indeed.
Okay, so great. All right, so the time is yours. So now we are excited to hear your presentation, Professor.
Thank you very much. I hope to share this here. And let me see if I can do this. Okay. Right. Well, so good evening and good morning. I want to speak today about the spheres of between great powers in the context of importance in the midst of the energy change. The first thing in the long run is that between 1980 and 2020, in those 40 years, the global economy stopped being pulled by the G7 countries and began being pulled by the Asian countries, namely by China. This shift from the Atlantic to the Pacific has changed the global economy overall. The weight of the Asian economies is now 32% of world GDP, and the G7 economies altogether weigh 30% of world GDP. Latin America dropped from 13% of the total in 1980 to 6% in 2020. So clearly, Latin America is fading out in the context of a new world order where Asia leads and is ahead of the G7 countries in economic dynamics. Some characteristics of advances on a financial logic. China advances on the real economy. The West values money and individual success, while China values the common good and social success. The West is essentially democratic, while China is essentially non-democratic. These are the elements within the spheres of influence. These components translate then into East-West politics. Ideology remains a fork line in geopolitics, and the result of that is that market globalization is fragmented. Great power conflict has become increasingly likely, but at the same time, this great power conflict seems to be more economic than military. So now the question is, what types of capitalism are we going to have with liberal democracies or not liberal democracies? But it's how much market and how much state are we going to have in the economy overall. And that's the discussion, and that's the tension between East and West. The evidence so far is that the introduction of market economies in Latin America had to do with not liberal democracies. With President Menem in Argentina, Fujimori in Peru, Salinas de Gortari in Mexico, Bolsonaro in Brazil. And so there isn't an equation between market economy and liberal democracy. That's clear. And I want to point this out because sometimes we get confused and think that market economy is equal to liberal democracy, which is not. What we are watching is a dichotomy where market economy comes from illiberal regimes. Successful economies of Asia are not liberal. Slow growth in the West and democracy are strongly linked. And liberal regimes in Asia and fast growth in illiberal regimes in Asia and fast growth are also strongly linked. So you have two worlds, no? A Western democracy with slow growth and Asia with fast growth with not so liberal regimes. And this has returned an old discussion of spheres of influence, which previously was considered to be a discussion, a military discussion. And that happened at the end of the 19th century when the European empires split Africa among themselves. Now that the concept of spheres of influence has come back in a different way, because global competition today is and what we now have competing inside the countries for the benefit of the power of the country of origin of that capital. And that's a completely different way of approaching international power. It used to be that it was from the military. Now, today, it is from the economics. And there is a very stiff competition between China and the Western firms in Latin America, but I am sure that stiff competition exists all over Asia as well, as much as there is a stiff competition between Chinese firms and European firms in Europe. So what we now have is firms, companies entering new territories that formerly belonged to the market of United States companies, US multinational firms. And that change is a general phenomenon, but more importantly, in the case of energy, what we're watching is shift in the energy matrix. And the shift in the energy matrix is being led by China, that holds the beginning of the global value chain of solar energy, wind energy, and has the high technology for hydroelectric power. At the same time, China holds the technology for electric vehicles and electric mass transport vehicles, and is the country that has expanded the most in this field globally. So, in the competition, there's an energy competition in the different parts of the world. And this energy competition in different parts of the world has to do with renewable energy versus fossil fuels, where China is entering renewables and fossil fuels are still held by Western firms. So there we have a double conflict. But we have another additional conflict, which is that the spheres of influence theory has become more relevant because of the geoeconomic competition between China and the States. But more dramatically, the power whose spheres of influence is eroded tends to feel this development threatens its security. And this is the point where I want to go. There are hard power factors and that have to do with the sphere of influence. Some of it has to do with the size of the military and with the economy, the size of the economy. But there are other hard power factors. Technology is one of them. And renewable energy technology and energy distribution are an issue of dominance, much like the control of oil extraction and distribution. So what we now have is this hard power element in conflict between two great powers, and the rest of us are under the umbrella either of one or the other. But that's clearly the new global economic structure. I want to read here from the National Security Strategy of the United States in October 2022. What they wrote was that the People's Republic of China harbors the intent and increasingly the capacity to reshape the international order in favor of one that tilts the global playing field to its advantage, even as the United States remains committed to the responsible management of competition between our countries. The People's Republic of China is the only competitor that has both the intention to reshape the international order and the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to do so. Beijing has ambitions to create a greater sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific and become the world's leading power. The meaning of competition in great power competition can be defined by the presence of three essential ingredients. First, there must be some measurable or perceived contention. The participants must see themselves as competing. The example of this is the trade war between the United States and China that continues. It's still going on. And the most recent measure has been to forbid Huawei from selling its cell phones in the United States. This perceived contention allows us to understand how much the market is important in great power competition. Secondly, the contestants must be seeking to enhance their power or position concerning one another. And this is a major problem because this involves other countries. For example, microchips are made, 75% of all microchips are made in Taiwan. We all know that microchips have several steps along the way until they get into the final good. One of the steps used to be the United States. So it went from Taiwan to the US, and then from there to China, South Korea, or wherever. And then it went back to a next country for a final good. Now, in the search for a greater power, what has happened is that the US has blocked microchip trade and has exerted its power over microchips, creating a major global economic problem with a lack of microchips. At the same time, it has instituted a major subsidy, about $300 billion US, to create the conditions to produce microchips in the United States. That will impact all countries in Asia and in Europe
that have to do with microchips and with the production and use of microchips. So that's a second element. The third one is that the contestants are struggling over, must be in a limited supply, or the contestants are struggling over something that is limited. And what is limited is the total size of the territory. That's what's limited. So they compete for having the entire market of one particular country or another, and basically excluding the other one from that game. That great power competition in energy is very complicated. The meaning of national security in great power competition has four components. First, a persistent degree of interstate competition to maximize power or influence. Secondly, more pointed rivalries between states seeking system leadership. Thirdly, fully militarized rivalries between aggressive states willing, even anxious, to use force. And fourth, the concept of competition in most in the discussion today is organized campaigns of action to gain an advantage short of later war. From the point of view of China, there are 5 spheres to develop Chinese socialism, and these are the economic, political, cultural, social, and ecological development. Now, why are we bringing this up? Because energy has to do with sustainability. And China, while it is the world's largest coal consumer, it is also the leader in renewable energy. It is also the starting point of global value chain of renewable energy components and technology. And China has entered, at least in Latin America, very strongly with its technology to generate renewable energy and thus open the way for the reduction in the consumption of fossil fuels. This is a problem for oil exporting countries like Mexico, Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Bolivia that have oil, export oil, but what's worse, finance their national budget with oil-related revenues, such as selective consumer tax on gasoline use and the profit tax on the government-owned oil companies. All of these countries have state-owned oil companies. So you see, while on the one hand, we are pressing for sustainable energy, and China is leading the way with renewable energy and with electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, and with electric mass transport, buses and metros and trains in Latin America. While it is doing that, at the same time, the countries that are receiving this energy, this change, are sort of sitting on their oil base and not wanting to give in to the change because it would be costly. At the same time, and also, the main export of the United States to the Latin American countries, to almost all Latin American countries, is refined gasoline. So you see, there is a competition here between the two great powers. The one is going into renewables, the other one is staying in fossil fuels. And there's a competition there that is clashing. And I fear this that I am watching for Latin America is something that is general. It is not only happening in Latin America. I imagine, I have not studied nor have I read anything on the subject, on how it is happening with the African countries, but certainly, or with the Asian countries. Indonesia is an oil exporting country, for example. So if Indonesia has started to change its energy matrix, does it have the same sorts of problems with giving up oil in the long run? Or is it not being considered? Or what is the position of the Indonesian government in face of sustainability? Do we want sustainable energy or not? And are we willing to pay the price of sustainable energy? That's the question. So the competition between the two great actors opens up a discussion that is between all of the actors that are under the umbrellas, whatever umbrella we're under. And I understand and I fear that unless we can produce a path of change into sustainable energy, what will happen is that the contradiction between having the one or the other energy and the fiscal cost of doing so will prevent the change. And I understand that is what has been preventing the change so far. That's why in COP27 they could not reach an agreement. We're stuck. And I think we have to get out of this so that we can retake and relaunch the concept of sustainability forward. Otherwise, I fear we're stuck right now in the discussion. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Professor Oscar, for the enormously interesting presentations. That was really enlightening. You mentioned regarding the global competitions, economic competitions, and hard power. That was the issue that we need to tackle nowadays. So I believe there will be a lot of questions later on, but I think we need to move to the next speakers. And so that I'm not lonely on the stage, I would like to call Mr. Khalil Manaf to go to the stage with me. All right, so we're going to move to the next speakers, Dr. Khalil Manaf. So he's an expert in trade policy, focusing on Southeast Asia and specializing in trade and sustainability. He has extensive experience and network across Indonesia and Malaysia. He has worked as an advisor for trade policy and certifications to the governments of Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, and Australia as well. He provides ongoing policy advice to government and private sector in Southeast Asia, covering agriculture, manufactured goods, services, and investments. And also he managed trade policy research and advocacy programs for a broad range of company and industry bodies in the Indo-Pacific regions. These include socio-economic impact assessments for major agriculture and industrial development, conformity assessment for certification systems, and broad stakeholder consultation process. He has represented civil society organizations at multilateral meetings, including the UNFCCC. So, Mr. Khalil Manaf, I think you will give us another perspective, because I believe that you have so many experience in that field. And as I read as well, you have so many networks in Southeast Asia. So I think this perspective will enrich our knowledge so that we can have a lively discussions. And then perhaps all of the students, we are going to continue this topic later on with a professor or with a panelist or with you even. So please take the time, is yours.
Test. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you to everyone here, and thank you to the organising committee for inviting me. Really appreciate it. I do love Jakarta. It's, you know, in a lot of ways my second home, one of my favourite cities in the world, but my Indonesian is still not very good. So I'm sorry I can't deliver in Indonesian today, but this is an English language conference, so that's okay.
So please give applause that he loves Indonesia.
So today, just continuing with the particular theme of this session on non-alignment, what I'm going to try and do is really use Indonesia-EU relations and Indonesia trade relations, particularly on palm oil, with the European Union as, you know, perhaps a case study for that broader non-alignment theme, and talk about where we can, you know, how that relationship is developing and what it means with for Indonesia's relationships with its neighbours in the region, what it means for ASEAN, what it means for relationships with North Asia, particularly China, Korea, Japan, and how that is in some ways really coming to define the relationship that Indonesia is coming to have with the West. And that I'll really get that towards the end of the presentation, but initially what I'll talk about is some of the current issues that are taking place with the Indonesia-EU relationship as it relates to trade, and also about some of the how that's being expressed in terms of EU policy towards Indonesia and the actions that they're trying to take around with Indonesia, whether that's on a bilateral level or whether that's through some multilateral institutions such as the WTO. So hopefully you'll find some of this interesting. Sometimes it really puts people to sleep. If you do fall asleep, that's okay. That's my fault. But I'll try and keep it as entertaining as possible. All right, so next slide, please. Okay, so let's just, if we talk about the larger sort of relationship between Indonesia and the EU, obviously the EU is a fairly significant trade market for Indonesian commodity exports. But, you know, really when it comes down to it, Indonesia's relationships within the region, you know, obviously with China, in terms of trade, that's obviously the most significant one. That's not uncommon, particularly in the region. If you look at the different economies, whether it's Australia, Malaysia, Vietnam, very much a similar pattern, though, you know, there are moves afoot, particularly by those governments, to really try and change that and try and diversify those export markets for those countries. Indonesia is less of an important trading partner for the EU. But where we're at here is sort of a fairly critical juncture for Brussels and for the European Union, because the EU is really seeking some stronger economic relationships within the ASEAN region, with ASEAN as a grouping or as a multilateral organisation, and with other Asia-Pacific members. So because of the economic situation within the European Union, particularly being driven by an economy such as Germany, which is really trying to diversify their export markets, particularly outside of the EU, because, you know, as a friend put it to me one day, there's only so many cars that Germany can sell to Greece. You know, there's a real limit to consumer growth and within the European Union. Can we go back, please? Sorry. Go back. Thank you. And back further. No, backwards. Backwards. Yeah. Back to my first. can't remember where I am. No, the one before that. Yeah, okay. Thank you. And one other thing, it's the Brussels is really seeking better geostrategic relationships in the region. So it's in some ways attempting to do what the US is trying to do, but perhaps on a much smaller scale, which is seeking to counter Chinese influence within the region. But at the same time, it's also really concerned about losing that influence to the US as well as the UK, who are really pushing their own agenda in the region as well. Okay, next slide, thank you. Okay, so one of the ways that this trade relationship is expressing itself right now and how it's emerging is that there are a set of trade tensions between Indonesia and the EU, even as the EU is trying to gain a closer alignment with Indonesia. One of the most recent of these is this the trade tensions around nickel and steel, principally because of Indonesia's ban on nickel exports. Indonesia is obviously one of the major nickel exporters in the world. And this is a really significant commodity for European stainless steel manufacturers. Can we go back, please? The previous slide. No, the previous. No, previous. Beautiful, thank you. And obviously nickel is also an important strategic commodity for the battery supply chain, and the EU is struggling to get its battery industry off the ground and is having a lot of difficulty competing in that space, particularly with China. Now, Indonesia Indonesia lost that case that was brought against it within the WTO. So EU made the case that the nickel export ban was illegal under the WTO agreements. The WTO sided with the EU on that. Now, what that means is that Indonesia is going to appeal the decision, but because the WTO doesn't actually operate properly right now, that appeal isn't actually going to go anywhere, and that's just going to sit as it is. So, but alongside that, this sort of dovetails into what's happening with the European steel industry. So the EU's applied a new set of what we call countervailing duties, which is just another name for a set of tariffs on steel from Indonesia. Now, the EU is arguing this because they're saying that the Chinese investment in Indonesia is effectively granted a subsidy by Chinese firms back in China. Now, it's quite a complicated legal argument and it's very novel. But what the EU is arguing is therefore that some Indonesian steel should be subjected to those import tariffs. So alongside that as well, the EU's going to apply what they're calling the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is a new set of non-tariff measures for Indonesian steel products. Have the next slide, please.
Well, before Mr. Khalid move on, I think we should quite keep silent, please. I hope people can also hear his voice virtually. Then we can concentrate in the discussion later. Thank you, my students.
So at the same time the nickel and steel things are happening, we're also having a set of trade tensions over palm oil. So the EU has, the EU originally applied some anti-dumping tariffs on biodiesel. This went to the WTO. Indonesia won that. But then pretty much, I think it was 2 months later, the EU applied what they call countervailing duties again on Indonesian biodiesel from palm oil. Alongside that, the EU has a ban on palm-based biodiesel within their renewable energy schemes. That's currently at the WTO as well, because Indonesia launched that case. The interim panel, they have completed their report. It hasn't been released yet, and Indonesia is likely to win. And finally, as well, with the deforestation regulation that the EU is introducing, which is aimed at basically preventing imported deforestation from entering the EU, and it's imposing a new set of non-tariff measures on palm rubber, coffee, cocoa and timber from Indonesia. It's applying it to other commodities as well, such as soybean, beef, potentially quite a large list. And going to that bigger theme about, the impact of these kinds of things on small businesses, et cetera, there are 4 million smallholder farmers in Indonesia. There are 2.7 million palm smallholders as well. So one of the things that the deforestation regulation is attempting to do is require that every import have what we call geolocation. So basically you'd have to be able to precisely define where the fresh fruit bunches that go into the palm oil actually come from. So that could be somewhere in Sumatra, it could be somewhere in Kalimantan. Now, that might seem like a big deal, and some of the larger companies they'll be able to absorb that cost. But in terms of actually trying to impose those kinds of costs on very small enterprises that are maybe operating on 3 or 4 hectares in Indonesia, that's where it starts to get difficult, because you have you can't necessarily expect those farmers to be able to absorb that if they are in fact exporting to the EU. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, next one. So just to give you an indication, some of you will probably be quite aware of this, but just in terms of how important palm oil is in terms of Indonesia's overall exports. So way over on the left, you see palm oil, and it really is Indonesia's largest export. So when trade pressure is applied to a country's largest export, obviously that country is going to respond, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Australia, whether it's the United States, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so these are the markets for palm oil, Indonesian palm oil. I'll just keep this really simple because it's fairly self-explanatory, but we can see India, China, and then you can see European countries in purple there, though obviously that's not just the EU, that's sort of Europe as a bloc. And the importance of the Indian market is obviously massive, not just for Indonesia, but also for India. When there was a temporary trade ban introduced on palm oil earlier this year, there was a fairly strong reaction from the Indian government as well, just because of the massive shortage of vegetable oil around the world at that time. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll just quickly move to stearic acid here. This is a palm oil derivative. Again, you can see the split between the markets. Next slide, please. And then I've just included this one as well. This is Indonesia's exports to the Netherlands. Now, this is significant just because it gives us it's a very good proxy for Indonesia's exports to the EU. So over on the left, you can see stearic acid is bigger than palm oil, meaning there's a bigger value add in that particular export going to the EU. And that's kind of a little bit different to what gets sold to China and India. So you can see there again, palm oil really dominates in exports to the EU. So that's why this Indonesia-EU palm oil relationship is particularly significant for the bigger relationship going forward. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the EU is, most countries are pretty protectionist when it comes down to it. Because, most governments just want to look after their own farmers, they want to look after their own workers. It's not particularly unusual. You do get exceptions to that, particularly export-oriented countries. Vietnam's a good example, Australia's a good example, where having that access to foreign markets and the significance of that outweighs any protections that you might want to put in place at home. So just sort of summarising what they're doing on nickel, the EU needs the nickel so it can compete against Indonesia's steel and battery manufacturing, but at the same time, it doesn't want to invest heavily in Indonesian manufacturing, and it's attempting to stop others from investing in Indonesian manufacturing. This is for steel. And on palm oil, the EU is really seeking to protect its own farmers producing for the biodiesel market, and it's doing so under the name of renewable fuels and the environment. But that is going to mean significant problems with the vegetable oil supply chain back home in the European Union, particularly with the Russia conflict, and generally high vegetable oil prices and high commodity prices. Next slide, please. Okay. So, stepping beyond just the sort of regular trade relationship, there are other ways that this relationship is being expressed. Currently, there's a negotiation between the EU and Indonesia for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement or free trade agreement. The negotiations here, my understanding is that they're actually very well developed in terms of most parts of it, but they're very much being held up by sustainability concerns because, the EU keeps shifting the goalposts during the negotiations and adding extra sets of conditions which are basically being determined by EU domestic policy, particularly the carbon border adjustment mechanism, as I mentioned before, and the deforestation regulation. There's been a similar problem for the EU-Mercosur agreement. And if you're not sure what Mercosur is, it's a Latin American bloc of countries. Brazil is the largest member. So it's basically, really, when it comes down to it, a Brazil-EU agreement. And again, this is just farmers seeking to, the EU attempting to protect its farmers there. Concerned about beef imports, feed imports, and vegetable oil markets. Environmentalists, they're concerned about deforestation, but what you get within the EU is farmers and environmentalists actually working together because their interests are really aligned, which is keeping out imports from Indonesia or elsewhere. Next slide, please. Okay, so Indonesia has some very good options going forward. So with the WTO, Indonesia is likely to win its palm oil case. The EU will appeal, probably. Indonesia is in a situation where it can try and arbitrate with the EU on both cases. That's what's called ad hoc arbitration to find a solution. It can appeal a nickel case. And what we do is we call that appealing into the void. I mentioned that before. It means the case won't be heard. And Indonesia could also appeal the nickel case and adhere to the ruling, wind back the export ban, but then increase its export taxes. So it actually becomes something of a de facto ban, and that would still be okay within WTO rules. Now, what can the EU do? They can arbitrate on both, as above, or they can appeal the palm oil case into the void. But one thing about the EU is they have no problem ignoring WTO rulings. This is what happened with their case with the United States and beef. Okay, next slide, please. So there are also some options for Indonesia going forward with the bilaterals. Now, one really important thing to remember is the EU has a lot more to lose in this region than Indonesia. Indonesia actually has greater leverage and a much better hand than the EU going forward. Its trade investment prospects are much greater. It has a large number of other agreements with potential going forward. So it's already negotiating with a number of other countries. For example, it's on the verge of renewing or upgrading its existing Indonesia-Japan agreement, which is really significant as well. There's a question that often comes up, which is, will Indonesia lose out to other ASEAN members if it doesn't go ahead with an EU agreement? People will point out a country like Vietnam or a country like Singapore. They're really special cases. Singapore doesn't have industries to protect per se. It really is just sort of like an open trading post. Vietnam is, as Professor Oscar mentioned before, I think it's a very planned and controlled economy, and they're in a position where they're really orienting themselves to be completely export-oriented. Thailand will be very reluctant to liberalise. Malaysia is a small market. Really, the prize of Indonesia for the EU is the Indonesian domestic market, and this should not be given up without a fight on strategic commodities like palm, nickel, and steel. Next slide, please. Michael? All right. Next slide, please. Okay. So, in sort of wrapping all of this up, Indonesia is in a position where it can afford to be patient. The EU can't. There were some very good reports coming out recently where I think it was a German official basically said that the EU is desperate to get more agreements signed across the region. It's stepping up its diplomatic activities in Indonesia. I spoke to one official here and they said it's all a little bit too little too late from the EU. You also have a case where some EU diplomatic activities really aren't aligned with Indonesia goals. There's a program called Terpercaya that's being run by European NGOs. It's aimed at palm oil sustainability. But the interesting thing about this Terpercaya program, this was all happening at a time when the ISPO was being revised. That's the Indonesia Sustainable Palm Oil Standard. RANKSB was being developed. That's the 5-year sustainability plan for palm oil that was developed here in Indonesia. Those two things were completely ignored by the Terpercaya program, and so were major local stakeholders, including the largest smallholder farmer organisation, Apkasindo. So there's some very, very strange things. Some people could say that this is basically EU incompetence, but it could also be something more of a conspiracy. Generally, I prefer incompetence because that's a better explanation for most things. Next slide, please. Okay. As I said before, Indonesia has a much stronger hand in terms of leverage. So what can Indonesia do? Indonesia is in a position where it can, on the deforestation regulation in the EU, seek what they call a low-risk designation for Indonesia in the forthcoming regulation, have Indonesia's sustainability certification recognised in that EU regulation, particularly for small farmers. And this gets back to the thing that I was talking about, impact on small businesses. We're going to try and minimise the impact of these non-tariff measures on Indonesian farmers. That's absolutely vital. In the IEU SEPA, very similar. Seek recognition for Indonesia's sustainability standards in the agreement, Indonesia's sustainable palm oil, SVLK, which is the legality standard for Indonesian timber and paper products, and also IFCC KSK, which is a sustainability standard, not just a legality standard for Indonesian timber products as well. With the WTO case, what the EU does on palm oil and the palm oil decision would be really a critical turning point for the relationship between the EU and Indonesia. And this is going to send a clear signal from the EU about how serious it is about the relationship with Indonesia. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm not sure if you saw this. This was from 2 weeks ago. This was the cover of The Economist. And, you know, it's always great when Indonesia's on the cover of The Economist. It's always really nice. But the thing that I didn't like was it said overlooked. And my question is, who's overlooking Indonesia? Is Indonesia overlooked by China? No. Is it overlooked by Japan? No. You know, Japan's had major investments in Indonesia for a very long time. Is it overlooked by other ASEAN members? Of course not, because Big Brother, right? And is Indonesia overlooked by the West? Well, yeah, you know, probably, because that's where this whole idea of people not getting Indonesia, that's where it's coming from. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we're thinking about non-alignment, you know, there are perhaps two ways to think about it. And this goes back a little bit to what Professor Oscar was saying. So, you know, the ASEAN way is very much, we're doing our own thing. We're not going to align ourselves with anyone in particular. And those sorts of alignments aren't particularly simple. You know, Vietnam is a great example of a country that isn't particularly aligned with anyone. It doesn't necessarily get along well with China, but it has a strong trade relationship with them. It has quite a good relationship with Russia. It also has quite a good relationship with the United States and the EU as well. So going back to how alignment or non-alignment, the EU and palm oil fit together, and the points about it being the largest agricultural export for the region as well as for Indonesia. It's the second largest agricultural product in the region, not just for Indonesia. And there are ASEAN institutions around palm oil that have been developed. And these are the Council for Palm Oil Producing Countries and the ASEAN EU Joint Working Group on Palm Oil. But all of these activities are largely EU focused. And this gets back to another point, which is perhaps the EU is the outlier here, because actually nobody else hates on palm oil as much as the EU. Everyone else is fine with it. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I think that was my last slide, I'm pretty sure. I talked for a long time, I'm sorry. Okay.
All right, so I think this is starting to get interesting, right? So, right, all right, I love to hear that. Okay, so Mr. Khalid, also thank you very much for your highlight that you mentioned in your presentations. You're talking regarding the tensions between the EU and Indonesia. And this also giving an impact to the small SMEs in Indonesia, of course, not only in Indonesia, I believe. So I think we have now two perspectives from the Mexico side in the US, and then also from the Australia, Indonesia, Asian side. So guys, please collect all the questions, because this is the very rare chance for you to discuss, and not every day you can discuss such a thing, because this topic is quite sometimes sensitive to be tackled. But now we are in the academia, so we can talk everything, right? Of course, with the way that you enrich your knowledge. So thank you very much again, Mr. Khalid. Please give a big applause for that. All right. So let's move on to the next speakers, Professor Tulus Tambunan. Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hello. Good morning.
Good morning, Professor Tulus. Are you ready for the presentations?
Oh, since yesterday.
Since yesterday, great. Okay, let me read you short bio first. So Professor Tulus Tambunan is a professor in the Faculty of Economic and Business and director of the Center for Industry, SME and Business Competition Studies at the Trisakti University. He holds bachelor degree or the doctorandus and PhD degree in economics from Erasmus University in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and has published many books at home and abroad. Overseas, among others, like Economic Crisis and Vulnerability, The Story from Southeast Asia, New York Nova Science publisher include in 2012, SME in Asian Developing Country published in London, and Development of MSME in Developing Countries, Story from Asia, Africa, and Latin America published in Delhi. Indonesia, there are many publications from the LP3AS, international trade, and the theory, and then the invention of the empirical, and then also how to understand the crisis. So I think this will be another perspective from the Indonesian side, Professor. But I believe you also got so many experience from the Indonesia side, from the European sides, and also in Africa, in other Asian countries. So please take time. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the PowerPoint is from me or from the organizer? Because I shared already yesterday.
I think it will be from the organizer.
Okay, I wait.
But I think we need to wait for a couple of minutes.
Yes, okay, no problem.
You have to.
In the meantime, let me say good morning for everyone in Jakarta, and maybe good afternoon and good evening for other speakers somewhere in the globe. In Australia, but although the speaker is here in Jakarta, but Australia is already afternoon, yes, sir? Yeah. Okay. So I'm ready, but the pilot is not ready.
It's almost, I think. I think we need to adapt due to COVID. It's a bit slow down.
Okay. So let me start. So as the title tells itself, I will focus on the role of G20. As you know, that Indonesia is just ended the presidency of G20 last November. So, and I was involved in one activities to prepare for the November summit that was small, medium, and micro, small, medium enterprises. So there's many agreed actions should be taken, hopefully. So not as business as usual, because I was also involved in APEC many times, also in ASEAN, especially for agreement not binding. So nothing happened. So I hope this time at least India as the new presidency of G20 will continue with more concrete actions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We might ask ourselves, at least I have these questions in my head. First, in what kind of world we are living now? And second, can global economic growth sustain, especially with the news that next year we will have a recession, hopefully not true. Hopefully we can prevent it from happen. But can global economic growth sustain? And the third question is, do all countries, like members of ASEAN, member of APEC, or member of G20, G7, or EU, or all member of United Nations, wants to cooperate, really want to cooperate to achieve peace and prosperity of the world community? These are three important questions that I think right now are really actual questions, really relevant to be asked. Next slide, please. Now, with respect to the first questions, the kind of world today, what kind of world today that we are living in? What I see, at least, I hope you also agree with me that global economic recovery has slowed. We had hope after COVID-19, but then came Russia, Ukraine war, and then our hope dismissed again, disappeared. So global economic recovery has slowed and is facing major setbacks as a result of the climate, biodiversity, and pollution crisis, and the COVID-19 pandemic, and finally Russia's war against Ukraine, which also disturbed global supply chains, and many others. Next slide, please. And at the same time, many developing countries, including least developed countries and small island developing states like in the Pacific, have serious difficulties to sustain economy. These countries, these small countries, small states, island states, are struggling to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and to adjust to the ongoing infections and impact of the virus, grappling with record inflation, rising interest rates and debt burdens, and the need for reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy, and also global supply chains disruption, geopolitical tensions, environment degradation, climate change, biodiversity loss, exacerbating gaps in gender equality, increasing global food insecurity, and the global education crisis that can, in my opinion, dramatically affect their population and thereupon efforts and investment to advance the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please.
I think we got a problem with the poor connections. Professor Toulouse, can you hear me? All right. So
Ini isut pas tulus tuh.
all right. Welcome, Miss Sembieva. Nice to meet you here.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Professor, let me first ask the Professor Toulouse, because I know you're quite busy, right? So, Professor Toulouse, can you hear my voice? I think Professor Toulouse is kicked out from the Zoom, from the link. All right. Okay. To make it not too overdue, I think we can start now with Professor Lazayat Sembieva from the Kazakhstan. Then maybe we can continue later on with the Professor Toulouse. So hello, good morning, Mrs. Sembieva. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine as well.
So you're gonna have the translation, right, for your presentation?
Yes.
All right. So before moving on to your presentations, let me read your curriculum vitae. Professor Lazayat Sembieva is a professor from Department of Finance, Gumilyov Eurasian National University, and she graduates from Kaznu Al-Varabi Specialty Finance, Money Circulations, and Credit. She also interested in money, credit, currency transactions, banking, investment, securities, financial risks, and she has many publications in related area. So, Ms. Sembieva, Professor Sembieva, we are so excited to hear your presentations, and I'm so glad that you are. There is a woman to present all of the women here, so we would like to hear your point of view. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, dear participants of the second Jakarta Economic Sustainability International Conference Agenda 2022, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sembieva Lazayat, Professor, Doctor of Economic Science. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in such a large-scale event. I hope that I will still have the opportunity to come to Jakarta with my performances. Will you connect my presentation, or I am?
Yes, the technical will connect your presentation. Just
I connect
now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
The topic of my presentation, as you can see, development of the financial and technology market as a driver of economic growth in Kazakhstan. I will be making a report in Russian. Will my report be translated? Dear moderator.
Sorry, pardon? Can you repeat?
Will my report be translated?
Yes. But I don't speak Russian, unfortunately. So, does anyone who speak Russian here?
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. Финансовые технологии.
All right. The translator is Mr. Munadil. Are you there?
Okay. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Munadil. Professor Sembieva will present her presentation. Then kindly please translate her presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. What is it? I cannot to change my slide. Why? Do you see my presentation?
Yes, yes, we see it clearly.
Финансовые технологии или финтех – это отрасль, состоящая из компаний, использующих технологии и инновации, чтобы конкурировать с традиционными финансовыми организациями в лице банков и посредников в рынке финансовых услуг. В настоящее время
Financial technology or fintech, an industry made up of companies that use technology and innovation to compete with traditional financial institutions such as bank and financial service intermediaries.
В настоящее время рынок финансовых технологий, он является одним из самых быстрорастущих в мире, и финтех-продукты, они оптимизируют отрасль, расширяют и улучшают доступ к традиционным банковским, платежным и кредитным услугам. И объем финансовых технологий, как вы все знаете, сейчас очень огромный, и на данный момент на мировом рынке он превысил 460 миллиардов долларов США, превысит к 2025 году.
The financial technology market is currently one of the fastest growing in the world. Then financial products optimize the industry, expand and improve access to traditional banking, payment and credit service. Investment in fintech technology today are eventual exceed $416 billion by 2025.
Okay. На сегодняшний день гигантами финтех в мире является ряд компаний. Я не буду подробно на них останавливаться. Это Ant Financial, Amazon, Tencent, Apple, Google.
The fintech giants of the world competitor of banks. The first is Ant Financial from Alipay, from the
yes,
China.
Okay.
Bigger than Google's.
Рекордные инвестиции в мировой финтех составили 210 миллиардов долларов США. И, как вы знаете, аудиторская компания KPMG, она опубликовала исследование и показала, что за время пандемии COVID-19 объем инвестиций в финтех возрос в 2 раза. И в 2021 году в разработку финтех было вложено 210 миллиардов долларов США, что больше на 90 миллиардов. За 2021 год было совершено более 55,6 тысяч сделок для всех форм и размеров. И европейский финтех, они установили новый рекорд с общим объемом вложений в 77 миллиардов долларов США.
Recording investment in global fintechs 2010 210 billions on February 17, 2022. KPMG analysis published a study showing that investment in fintechs increased sharply of the previous years, despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, investors invested a total of 210 billions in fintech developers, nearly 19 billions dollars more than a year early, but slightly less than 214 billion dollars invested in 2019. More than 5,600 deals were successfully closed in the 12 months of 2021. Deal of shape and size from small investment in startup, seed investment, and investment in growing startup, Series A or B investment, to investment in established player, Series C or D investment, and fully acquisitions. Europe fintech companies in the KMPG port, the region is combined with the Middle East and African or EMEA, set a new record with a total investment $77 billion.
Thank you. Если остановиться на странах, которые являются ближайшими соседями для Казахстана, то по результатам отчетов компании Ernst & Young в 2019 году в тройку лидеров вошла Россия, рост составил 82%, Китай 87%, и Казахстан на сегодняшний день является одной из ведущих стран в Центральной Азии, которая достаточно серьезно продвигается в области финансового сектора и индустрии. Please.
Development of the financial technology market is driven of the economic growth in Kazakhstan from the global tradition regional how the things with the fintech neighbor with analysis in 2019. The result of the analysis of studies conduct Ernst and Young in 2019 showed the Russians entered the top of 3 countries in the terms of popularity of fintech service. Expert evaluation the penetration index on fintech service in Russian in between 18% to %. China is rating that highest rate 87%. In 2020, according to KPMG, Kazakhstan lead the direction fintech Central Asian thanks to relatively developed financial sector and infrastructure. Per Kazakhstan should be Uzbekistan, which short time made a digital breakthrough with the help of payment system and adoption of the legislative basis of the course for the introduction and development of digital banks. So in 2020, the commerce market in Uzbekistan amounted to $643.9 million, and in Kazakhstan, $143.4 million.
Thank you. Вот основные данные объема 21 рынка. Как вы видите, рынок электронной коммерции Казахстана, он составил $3,5 миллионов США. И при этом, как вы видите, Китай, он занимает 40% доли от всего объема всемирного рынка электронной коммерции. 4938 миллиардов США. Please.
In 2021, while in 2021 the market size e-commerce Kazakhstan reached mark $3.15 million. Volume Russian the financial technology market at the end of the 2021 reached 67.1 billion rubles, more than doubling compared to 2017, when the figure was measured at 31.7 billion rubles. In China, reached 14% share the total world market volume, $4,958 billion for e-commerce.
Thank you. Это основные факторы роста финтех в Казахстане. Это высокий уровень проникновения мобильной связи интернета, развитый рынок электронной коммерции и цифровых платежей в стране. И по оценкам глобального доклада «Стартап-экосистем», в 2020 году город Астана занял 2-е место по показателю быстро растущих экосистем. Также в 2021 году Казахстан впервые вошел в рейтинг The Global FinTech Index, занял 13-е место в Азиатско-Тихоокеанском регионе. И большой вклад в финтех развитие вносит это тех-хаб Международного финансового центра Астана. Please.
Pardon me, Professor Liazat. We can't see your slide. Can you just move on the slide to the next?
What?
Now we see the next slide.
Do you see?
Yes. Now we can see that. Thank you very much.
Now?
Okay, can I continue, right? Okay, there are 5-factor growth fintech technology in Kazakhstan. First is high level of penetration of mobile communication and the internet. Second, developed e-commerce and digital payment market in the country. And third is the GTS 2022. Astrana ranked second of the fast growing ecosystem in the global startup ecosystem report 2020. And then the fourth is in 2021, Kazakhstan entered the ranking for the first time the global fintech index in 2021, ranked in 13 in the ASEAN Pacific region. The great contribution to the development fintech ecosystem contributes hub Astana International Financial Center.
Что касается также развития, основные драйверы, то что 84% это в Казахстане проникновение интернета, это покрытие мобильной связью, уровень цифровой грамотности, доля безналичных платежей, распространение кредитных карт и распространение дебетовых карт. То есть цифровая волна, она сейчас отличается рядом характерных черт. Thank you.
Okay, development of financial technology in Kazakhstan, there are a lot of points. First is 84% internet penetration grow up, and then 136% mobile phone coverage, 82% digital literacy level, and 67% share of non-cash payment, 23% distribution of credit cards, 74% distribution of debit card.
Здесь вы видите это резкий объем электронной коммерции и резкий рост объема безналичных платежей.
This is also the graphic of the volume of how the e-commerce grow, and then volume of non-cash payment grow in Kazakhstan.
Yes, in 2 or 3 times.
Yes, in from 2015 until 2022.
Окей, thank you. Что касается основных трендов развития финтех в 2021-2022 году, в Казахстане первое – это практически все банки создают экосистемы. То есть это уход банка в экосистемы с точки развития собственных стратегий и маркетплейсов.
Financial 2021 trend in Kazakhstan from an analysis fintechs. First trend, particularly our bank ecosystem bank, right? Banking development trend ecosystem service, leaving STBs to ecosystem in the term of the developing their own strategies, and market place this year is even stronger.
Второй тренд – это запуск цифрового тенге. В 2021 году Национальный банк начал реализацию пилотного проекта для оценки технологических и операционных рисков, правил обсуждения с участниками по запуску цифрового тенге. Тенге – это национальная валюта Казахстана.
Second is about the Second is about the lot of local brand from the Kazakhstan who grow up like fintechs, not only banks, is nationals fintechs brand from Kazakhstan.
Yes, tenge is national value of Kazakhstan.
Tenge, да?
Yes, tenge.
Okay, да. Tenge is national brand from Kazakhstan.
Yes. Третий тренд – это внедрение government tech, то есть совместных технологических решений банков и государства. Please. Тренд 3, government tech.
Да, но здесь we slide нету вам. Tenge это the third large of the brand in Kazakhstan national brand, да?
Yes, government tech, тренд 3 вы видите? Do you see тренд 3?
Да, тренд 3, да. Нет, здесь нет слайдов.
Do you see? No.
Да.
Now. Почему не вред? Вы видите?
Нет, я не видел.
Ой, бай. А что тут?
Потому что здесь не поменяет это слайд.
Не меняет слайд, да? Я
Да, не
меняю.
меняет слайд, поэтому.
I choose.
Tolong ini slide-nya tolong diganti.
Я меняю. Почему он у вас не меняется?
I'm sorry, the slide is not from the technical here.
Now.
I think it's from your computer, right? From your laptop.
Do you see next slide, trend 3?
Great. We see the presentations. How, unfortunately, we don't see that it's moved to the next slide.
Now.
Нет.
Right. Now it's moving to
здесь, да.
Так видно, да? Так видно?
Да, я смотрю.
Все. Ага, все хорошо. Тренд 3.
Trend 3 это government tax joint technological solution of the bank of the state. The advantage of the shocks trend are two side situation win. For the state as an access point to public service, a digital service of banks. Second is the bank increase transaction activity, cross-selling, improving service through seamless service. The last one is additional user due to new service.
Окей. Next slide. Это что представляют стартапы в Казахстане. Тут просто название фирм.
Next slide is a lot of new startup from Kazakhstan who grow, да?
Yes.
Да.
Далее, что касается направления развития стартапов, как вы видите, это 20% платежи и переводы, финансовые решения, МАП, сбережения. И здесь основные этапы. Давайте я дальше пройду. Это основная возрастная категория. Так, то есть тут анализ по возрастам, по гендерному, что 30% это женщины, и вот возраст, какой же возраст? Это в основном средний возраст. Далее, это что касается специфики казахстанского рынка финтех, это то, что доминирующая роль в основном в части платежей, сервисов, закредитованность населения, нехватка специальных квалификаций, неготовность корпоративной культуры и отсутствие опытного и надежного партнера.
Specification of the Kazakhstani market fintechs problem, да? The domination of the some market play in the term payment of P2P service. Second is depth of lot of the population affecting business model and showing down the scale of the digital products. Lack of special qualification for pinpoint search, scouting, sustainable startup, and estimate the products, command, technology, scalability, and etc. The fourth is underpreparedness corporate culture for with the open of innovation in general, lack of support, society higher guides, absence of experience and reliability partner ready to and company process search estimate standing decided of the startup. Следующий.
Thank you. Что касается основных направлений, также специфики казахстанского рынка финтех, это то, что сейчас Казахстан имеет большой потенциал, так как охват населения составляет 98%, очень высокий потенциал. Одним из больших шагов в развитии финтех стало создание отдельных площадок финтех и регтех в рамках Международного финансового центра и разработка отдельной концепции развития финансового сектора.
specificity of the Kazakhstani market, fintech's driver of economic growth in Kazakhstan development process. In Kazakhstan, the fintech market has great potential. Today, the coverage of the population with access to the World Wide Web with Triple-3 is about 98%. This is an extremely high and favorable level of the technological development. One of the big steps in the development of the fintech direction was the allocation of the separate platform for the fintech with the IEFC. The head of the state approved this concept for the development of the financial sector of the Republic of Kazakhstan is until 2030.
AFC is Astana International Financial Center.
Okay.
Yes.
AFC is Astana International Financial Center.
Yes, where work international company, other countries.
Okay.
Что касается основных целей, и здесь для того, чтобы развивать финтех в Казахстане, это внедрены инновационные экосистемы финтех-компаний, электронная коммерция, корпоративные инновации в финансовом секторе, рынок венчурного капитала и центр компетенции финтеха.
Fintech in hub of IEFC, create to promote and develop in Kazakhstan and regions. There are 5 ecosystems. First is innovation ecosystem of fintech companies. And then second is e-commerce. The third is corporate innovation in the fintech sector. And then third is ventures capital market. The last one is fintech competence centers.
Что касается вот AFC, в рамках него работает Fintech Hub, куда входят 125 стартапов из Центральной Азии, 14 локальных и международных программ поддержки стартапов, 27 представлены на международных конкурсах, 60 это воркшопы и так далее. Можете перевести все.
Okay. Fintech's Hub IEFC is numbered in 125 startups from the Central ASEAN, and the CIS is the Commonwealth Soviet, Unity Soviet received support.
Yes.
Plus 14 local or between people startup supported program, and 27 projects are presented at international competitions. 16 workshops and seminars, 19 partner companies of organizations, and 13 mentoring platform participation, 17 members of the membership program, 26 companies in the regulatory sandbox.
Great. Professor Liazat, I would like to give you a kindly reminder that you still have another 5 minutes for your presentation.
Okay. Я поэтому просто пройдем, что есть вот такая концепция развития финансового сектора, его основные направления. И вот буквально я просто по слайдам. Вот, просто скажите, какая концепция, презентацию я передам.
Да. The concept of financial sector development is 2020, transition of the anti-crisis regulation, the sustainable development, the financial market complies with the following 5 principles. There are 5 principles, you can read now.
Да, сейчас большой интерес у нас вызывает это open banking. Вот я тоже это все передам, просто сейчас покажу. В 2 словах скажите, да, open banking is very important for our fintech industry. My presentation have organizers. This benefits key drivers of open banking development in foreign markets, distribution of participants for the development of open banking, the impact of regulation. Regulation is very, RegTech is very interesting, and I think that this problem will be decided in future, our central bank. Most systems with open banking are conditioned by the development of regulation, other countries and Kazakhstan, IFC Kazakhstan. European system, Great Britain, and Singapore. Use cases of open banking can be classified into 5 groups. Do you see? Or you see? Can you see? According to the result, for the effective implementation of open banking, this model create our tenge, digital tenge, criteria and other, and the concept of financial sector development, a specificity of the Kazakhstan market fintech recommendation, and one of the important sector, our important way, the development, socio-economic development, our people. This degree. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your giving your opinion, and I hope that our cooperation will continue in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Professor Liazar, for your presentation. Please give again the big applause for the professor. All right, so that was really interesting. You also give the point of view related to Kazakhstan's fintech market, which is now growing, I guess. Now everybody, you had so many knowledge now. It's enriched your horizons, and we would like to know, because we are almost at the end of the sessions of the presentations. We would like move to Professor Tulus. Are you there?
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, you come back.
Internet down.
So can you see us? Can you hear my voice, or everyone? Right. So, okay. So, Professor, can you continue your presentation again, so that we?
I will keep short. I will keep short because time is. Okay. So we are in here. This slide. We must strengthen multilateralism. Please, next slide, please.
Okay, is it possible for you to open your camera, please?
I'm afraid because I try to prevent the internet down.
All right. So
I will try. Hopefully, the internet is not down again.
Okay, we understand. It's okay.
Already, yeah?
We can see. So,
talking about the strengthen the multilateralism, it is the role of all regional global associations such as ASEAN, APEC, and G20 should be strengthened. Even the non-aligned movement, or known as the Asia-Africa Conference, which has been suspended for a long time, needs to be revived. And it is necessary not only to increase trade and investment, but also to find the best solution for global warming and alternative energy, development of a green economy, circular economy, and blue oceans economy, creating peace and democracy, all of which will ultimately, at least theoretically, will improve the welfare of the world people. And okay, next slide, please. Next slide. The role of G20, now I come to the focus of my presentation, remains and continues to reinforce its role as the premier forum for international economic cooperation that can take decisive actions to global recovery, global resilience, and also sustainable development. And the G20 roadmap for stronger recovery and resilience in developing countries is already made, and It is a multi-year program of actions, the roadmap, aiming at accelerating the recovery of developing economies, and in order to implement the 2030 agenda and to achieve the social development goal and sustainable development goals, which include alleviating poverty and ending hunger and malnutrition, increasing human capital development, and increasing resilience to disaster risks and future shocks. Next slide, please. The roadmap sets out three key focus areas, and for our voluntary collective actions adopted because of their recognized positive impacts and multiple effects to meet the specific needs and to accelerate recovery in developing countries. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And the key focus area, the first key focus area are small and medium enterprises, including micro. Next slide, please. And the collective actions, just a moment. And the collective action, action one is promoting the adoption of comprehensive national frameworks and strengthening existing regulatory frameworks to improve coordination between all stakeholders in designing micro, small, medium enterprises sustainable development policies. And action two that the G20s agreed is encouraging countries to invest in reliable and comprehensive data on micro, small, medium enterprises and evaluating outcomes of micro, small, medium enterprises policies and programs. Next slide, please. And action 3 is supporting micro, small, medium enterprises digital transformation. And action 4, promoting policies research dialogue and North-South and South-South and triangular cooperation on MSMA's transition from informal to become formal. And action 5, promoting solutions for micro, small, medium enterprises financial inclusions and de-risking financing. Next slide, please. And key focus area 2, adaptive social protection. And we know that social protection systems that support the resilience of individuals and households at risk of life cycle and appropriate shocks are still rare across developing countries. And with the poorest societies falling behind, that is really a problem. And collective actions, the first is rising existing social protection system capabilities to support people's resilience. Action 2, investing in the establishment and expansion of social economic registries and associated risk data. Action 3, improving institutional arrangement and capacity to design and deliver ESP programs. And actions 4, promoting the role of disasters and climate change risk transfer instruments for financing social protection. Next slide, please. And key focus area 3, that is the last focus area, is green economy, including blue economy, through low GHG emissions or low carbon and climate resilience development. Environmental degradation, as we know, also the adverse impacts of climate change, especially extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and pollution are all expected to add more pressure on the global economy, which has deteriorated since 2020 because of the 19 pandemic. And next slide. And the collective actions, first, support developing countries in mainstreaming low GHG emissions or low carbon, and also climate resilience development strategies into their national development planning. Action 2, promoting just and inclusive transition towards a low GHG emissions or low carbon. Also climate resilience development path in line with the 2030 agenda. Section 3, enhance developing countries' capacity for promoting a green economy and blue economy. And Action 4, identify workable approaches on financing the transition towards the green economy and blue economy, as well as de-risking and attracting green investment, especially on low GHG emissions or low carbon technology. So the G20, that's my final slide, the G20 Bali Leaders Declaration that already happened last November is have a number of key points. Next slide, please. It is essential to uphold international law and multilateral system that safeguards peace and stability. Very important, especially in these days with the war Russia-Ukraine. It is essential that the G20 undertakes a tangible, precise, swift, and necessary actions using all available policy tools to address common challenges, including through international micro policy cooperation and concrete cooperation, including monetary policy, of course. Next slide. Protect macroeconomic and financial stability and remain committed to using all available tools to mitigate downside risks, noting the steps taken in the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, to strengthen financial resilience and promote sustainable finance and capital flows, and also to take action to promote food and energy security and support the stability of markets, providing temporary and targeted support to cushion the impact of price increases, strengthening dialogue between producers and consumers, and increasing trade and investment for long-term food and energy security needs, resilience and sustainable food, fertilizers and energy system. This is also very actual, very relevant issues to be discussed in these days. Next slide. Unlock further investment for low and middle income and other developing countries through a greater variety of innovative financing sources and instruments, including catalyzing private investment to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, support the international effort to food security chains and supply chains functioning under challenging circumstances. We are committed to addressing food insecurity by ensuring accessibility, affordability, and sustainability, and also to support the adoption of innovative practices and technologies, including digital innovation in agriculture, food system, and also in other sector, and also sustainability in harmony with nature and promote farmers. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry for the opportunity, and back to the MC.
Great. Thank you very much. Please give a big applause to Professor Toulouse. So, Professor, I think you also tackle the issue regarding what happened in G20, and also you talk regarding the collective actions. That was really also important and necessary. So,
this action will take place really in the future.
Right. Okay. So now we are now in the Q&A session. So everybody who would like to ask the speakers or the panelists, please just raise your hand, or those of you who are attending this meeting virtually, do not hesitate to write your questions in the chat room. Then we will read the questions. So I guess there are so many of you will ask so many questions, because this is regarding the global world. That's what's happened now in the world. That's also giving an impact to the small business and to all of us. So please do not hesitate to raise the questions to us, and then also to discuss this. Make this even lively, and then make this even last for your knowledge forever. That would be great. Thank you. Maybe I should go down. Michelle should go to ask the students. Please, you need to be brave. All right, we have now Mr. Hidayat. Please.
I will start. Let the student continue the rest. So, thank you very much for your explanation to all the speakers. I think it is very informative and very fruitful with the discussions. I have question to the first one for Mr. Khalil, who attend in this auditorium. So you said that we have very optimistic regarding the dispute between European Union and Indonesia in terms of the RED II conflict, and then we have another issue, which is the deforestation. Given the situation that we have now, whether it's true or not, that every leaders in the world now believe that next years will have the big recessions in 2023. And what happened in such recessions, the demand of the global will be declining. So if we lucky, and we are optimists, we will win, because this is not very proper in the way we have the fair trade. But the time, it's not really good for us, I mean for the Indonesians industry, because when it is win, but the demand is still lacking, so we don't have, we not benefit for the agreement. So do you believe this is still strategic in terms of the time?
That is a great question.
Mr. Khalid, hold on to that question first. Maybe I would give the floor if any of you would like to ask, or Bapak Faru. Okay, right.
I also have question for Prof. Surajit. Oh, sorry, your session is tomorrow. I have question for all speakers. We have talked about trade tensions, right? And you have already explained about the tension between West and the East, yeah, but and the North. But what about the countries in the South? I mean, yes, you have talked about China, but China is in the East, not in the South. So, what do you think that we can do as countries in the South? And also, I have question about. We also have talk about trade tensions, but what kind of tension that we really have actually between the West and the East? I mean, is it really trade tensions, or it is more like industrialization tension? Yeah, because countries in the West don't want countries in the East to be industrialized. I mean, what kind of tension? And I also have a question about the position of Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. You have mentioned that Indonesia maybe lose again from Vietnam, right? And do you think there is similarities between Indonesia and Vietnam, and or it is more like Indonesia with the Philippines that we have similarities? I think these are also same questions to Professor Tulus and to Professor Sembieva, but unfortunately Professor Oscar has left because of yeah, okay, maybe that is my question. Thank you.
Great. I think it's getting hot here. So the questions are sharp, and I think we could take another question. So I see the ones from the virtual Zoom raising the hand. Miss Rahmawati, please write down or open. Okay. Please raise your questions, and then we go to the answer. And also mentions the professor. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, the moderator, for the opportunities. Okay, my questions is for Professor Tulus. Ya, selamat pagi, Prof. Salam kenal. My name is Rahma Sari Fahria from Accounting Department, Faculty of Economics and Business, UPN Veteran Jakarta. We know that many products made in China are very cheap, and these products compete with our small and medium enterprises products. I met some SME entrepreneurs. They told me that now it's quite hard to compete with the products from China because the customers are prefer to buy products at low prices, regardless whether it is domestic or imported product. So my questions are, I have two questions for you. My first question is why the products made in China can be sold at such lower prices in foreign country. What the Chinese government do to help their SME industry? Then the second question is, in your opinion, can the Indonesian government adapt or follow the policies of Chinese government in developing our domestic industry, especially for SME sector? I'm asking these questions because although our government has Ministry of Koperasi dan UMKM, the contribution of SME sector only 14% of total national export. Yeah, I apologize if my voice is not clear enough because I'm having a cold. That's why I joined this conference through Zoom meeting. Thank you. That's all of my question.
So, all right. Thank you very much. That was really, I think, really heavy questions. So let's go to the first question from Mr. So I give Mr. Khalid the floor.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Just to so going back to that. So I mean, that's really a question about what the demand outlook for vegetable oils is over the short and medium term. And I mean, this is always very much a sort of crystal ball sort of type prediction, and obviously 12 months ago, some people who get paid a lot more than me and are a lot smarter than me made some predictions about global inflation. Completely incorrect. So I'll do my best, but just in
Enggak, boleh dari aja boleh atau enggak kasih bintang semua.
In terms of the overall demand picture,
kan dua, satu bintang, satu.
Reasonably flat, and certainly that's what a lot of people have said, just because of the lower sort of outlook for consumption across the board. But that said, I'm not convinced that prices are necessarily going to fall as people have said. And I say that because, for the past sort of 6 months, we've had this situation, particularly with energy and related to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where there has been this sort of consistent narrative, which is things are going to be better in 2023. Things are going to be better in 2023. We'll get there. And that just seems to be getting pushed back every month. And I'm referring really specifically to energy markets more than anything else, but because so much of the global supply is, whether it's different trade routes, whether it's the use of different maritime routes, or the development of new energy import infrastructure.
Gue cari tempat lain lagi deh.
I think we're perhaps seeing like a similar pattern with vegetable oil, and I think we're going to have that continual shortage of sunflower oil in the European and the global market, and we're also going to have additional pressures on the soybean oil market coming out of the United States because they're introducing a new biofuel policy there. So I actually think that that's going to keep vegetable oil prices up. So even though demand might be sort of flat or even tail off a bit, I think for the palm oil farmer and the palm oil refiner or processor here, I think they're going to be okay. But, I could be completely wrong. There were plenty of central bankers who were wrong, so...
All right. So maybe we can go to the question of Bapak Faru from Mr. Haritz that Faru asking you regarding the Vietnam Asian tension, something like that.
So
right?
perhaps, because that question is in 3 parts, so I'll go through each of those and then perhaps pass it on to Professor Toulis, because I'm sure he'll have some opinions on that as well. So I think, again, that's a great question, but I think, I think you're absolutely right in terms of the trade tensions. I'll just start with that part first. Trade tensions as they relate to industrial policy. I think that's absolutely correct. And what we're really seeing is an increasing level of trade tension created by that industrial policy. And we're really beginning. I think the best and most current example of that right now is what is happening actually between the EU and the United States, where you're actually having an increasing level of tension there because of US industrial policies and how they relate to where investment is going to go in the globe. And I saw a report a few months ago, maybe it was a few weeks ago, where BASF basically said, we want to relocate a significant chunk of our operations to the United States. And obviously, we're seeing similar things with the CHIPS Act in the US and what's happening the EVs and batteries, and how Korea is particularly upset about that, and how that could. My understanding there is as well is that's really prompted Korea to sort of not necessarily withdraw from IPEF, but certainly take a little step back and say, well, okay, if the US is going to continue on this path with renewables and what we want to do with our automobile manufacturing industry, maybe we won't go all the way with IPEF as the US is seeking. So there's certainly, I think you're absolutely right, that industrial policy aspect is definitely pushing trade tensions up, and the two are absolutely related. I think also what you might have been implying is that taking away the latter as well, and that's just something that I think is always there and absolutely consistent, which is the wealthier countries getting to a point of economic development, saying, okay, well, we're here now, you can't necessarily follow this path. I think it's absolutely valid, and certainly that's something that I feel very strongly about when it comes to, say, environmental management and deforestation, etc.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Khalid. Now, we move to the Professor Tulus regarding the question of Ms. Rahmasari. How is why China can sell such a lower cost product? And also, can Indonesia possibly adopt the policy in China? So, Professor Tulus, please make it short because we have a prior.
No, Indonesia cannot adopt. Indonesia cannot adopt China's policy because we have minimum wage law. I think China does not have minimum wage law. We have UMP, UMR. So
Pardon, we can't hear your voice, unfortunately.
Yeah. Please repeat again the questions.
The question is why China can sell such a lower cost product, and also can Indonesia, in your point of view, adopt the policy of China?
Okay. First, China is communist country, so the central government decide everything, including wage, and no one are allowed to complain. While in Indonesia, we have trade unions, and we have minimum wage law. And if the government try to adopt like the Chinese government, then certainly we will have many strikes, even violence. So because we are a democracy country and China is not, so very easy to understand. Second, they have more than 1 billion people, and we have only 270 million people. So the so-called the law of market is if too many stocks, the price low, scarce the stock, the price is high. So too many people, the wage certainly will be lower than a country with only few people. So that is very easy.
All right. So I hope Ms. Rama, you got the answer already, or is already satisfied you?
But please do not ask the Indonesian government, otherwise. The Indonesian government will be angry with the veteran university. Why you ask that kind of question?
I think with that statement, that will be now the last sessions of the end of the sessions. So maybe I would like to give some comments from my side regarding the discussions. I think it's now or never. Humanity needs solutions for the complex problems that affect it. And one discipline will not be enough to think about the new tomorrow. We have to do the cooperations to make the win-win solutions. And I'm so delighted that these sessions make visible the need to unite all fields of knowledge to find common ground, common solutions in this crisis for the common good. And I think in the future, we're going to have much more challenge to face. So we need to hand in hand together and collaborate, whether you are from South, from North, from the other country. We are one united and no one left behind. Thank you very much.
Marine.
Thank you. So
Marine.
with that,
no one left behind.
Yeah, that's dreams started from dreams, right? So I give it over to the MC. Thank you very much. Please give big applause to our speakers as well, and also to the coordinator, and also to the Faculty of Economic and Business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to our moderator and to our speakers too. Please give applause to our moderator. for lead today's discussions. Okay, we already heard about the relevancy of non-alignment and non-discrimination agreement impact to small business and palm oil. And we also heard about the Indonesia-EU relations, trade and palm oil. And we also know about G20 and international economic sustainability. And the last topic is about development of the financial technology market as a driver of economic growth in Kazakhstan. Okay, so let's keep on to the next agenda. We have a giving certificate to our moderator and to our speakers, and this will be given by our dean. So I immediately invite Associate Professor Dr. Dian Wicaksi Ariftiara, SEAK, MAK, CA, CRAS, as the Dean of Faculty Economic and Business UPN Veteran Jakarta. So, to our Dean, please come up to the stage to give the certificate to our moderator and to our speakers. Okay, please give applause to our speakers, Mr. Khalil Manaf Hijrati, PhD. Thank you so much for attending JESICA 2022 and also for the presentation. Thank you so much. And next, the certificate for our next is. This is a symbolically giving certificate to Professor Liazat Sembieva. Okay, next, give applause to our Professor Liazat. Thank you so much. And next, this is a certificate we give symbolically to Professor Oscar Ugartisi. Thank you so much to Professor Oscar for the presenting and JESICA 2022. Okay, next. Okay, this is the last one is for Professor Tulus Tambunan. Thank you so much, Professor Tulus. Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. They're very insightful. And thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Tulus.
Thank you very much too.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next is certificate to our moderator. So this is the certificate for our moderator. Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Friska, for leading today's discussions. Okay, thank you, Ms. Friska. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of today's agenda. Let us close the webinar by reciting Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Those are the agendas we have presented to you all this morning. We hope you learned something today, and I would like to apologize from the deepest of my heart for any mistake in presenting this event, and also I want to apologize from the deepest of my heart for any mistake in pronouncing names and titles. And we want to say thank you again to our sponsors. There are GAPKI, or Gabungan Pengusaha Kelapa Sawit Indonesia, and PLN Nusantara Power, PJB, Pembangkit Jawa Bali, Bank BRI, and Bank BTN. Thank you so much for the support. And don't forget to join with us again tomorrow, the last day of JESICA 2022. Thank you so much for your kind attention. See you on the next day. Wabillahi taufiq walhidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stay safe, stay healthy, dan salam bela negara. Thank you.
Salam bela negara.
The recording has stopped.